Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Female Entrepreneurship Support Program. And our program is a collaborative initiative by TechQuest STEM Academy in collaboration with Junub Open Space. And this initiative is part of the AfriLabs Capacity Building Programme, and it is funded by Agence Française de Développement. My name is Dr. Itoro Emembolu. You're very welcome once again. Today we'll be having two of our mentors speaking with us today, and what we'll be talking about is the art of pitching and investment and investor relations. And they'll be touching on how you could design effective business pitches and how to curate investors that could potentially support your business. So join me as I welcome our mentors today. We have Samirah Faruk, who is the Executive Director at Serendipity Healthcare Foundation. Samirah, you are welcome.
Hello, everybody. Good morning from cold and windy Kano. I hope we're doing great so far. Thank you for having me today.
Okay. And also with us here is Ugwumsinachi Okorie, who is the CEO of AM Steve House Group. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I think your audio is on mute. If you could enable your audio.
Okay.
Yes, I think you're on now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for having me, and to everyone, I look forward to an interactive section today. Thanks again.
Okay, you're welcome again. So before we go on, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and I welcome you once again, all our entrepreneurs, and thank you for always joining us and being consistent week on week. Please tell us in the chat box where you are connecting from, and also remember to, if you have questions for either Samirah or Ugwumsinachi, please put them in the chat box as the presentations go along, and we will address the questions once they are through with their presentations. Okay, so first up, we would have our first mentor speaking with us today. And as I earlier introduced her, she's Samirah Faruk, and she's a non-profit executive and a business development person who is a social change maker, and she works in rural communities that target women and children. She also volunteers her skills and services both on the field and off the field, and she engages in pro bono work, especially in the areas of hygiene matters. And she has over 16 years experience in the financial, public sector, and more recently in the development field. Samirah has expertise in financial management, arbitration, project management, training, community development, and participatory assessment. So we are in good hands. So I will hand you over to Samirah as she starts talking about the art of pitching. So over to you, Samirah.
Thank you, Doctor. That was you have really nice. You've blown my head too much. I am not that good anyway. You're welcome, everybody. Like Doctor said, I'm here to hold your hand in terms of how you're going to pitch your business and get yourself ready for investors. Yeah, so that by the time you're done there, you have them eating out of the palm of your hands. Now, what is pitching? Pitching, there are different kinds of pitches. A business pitch, which is basically what we're going to concentrate on today, is a presentation by one or more people to an investor or a group of investors, though it can be also through email, letter, and even an impromptu conversation. The goal of a business pitch is generally to secure the resources and funding necessary to move forward with a business plan or to continue with an already established business or venture. Now, for business pitch, yes, it sounds so technical, but for me, I believe that it goes beyond being uh, seeking for funding from your investors, because it's actually meant to be building a relationship between you and your investor. Either it could be through a bank or through angel investors, or most likely family and friends. So a business pitch, although it's technical, but it actually leads to you building a relationship with your investor. Yeah. Now, the goal of a pitch is that generally is to secure this funding, but it goes beyond that. You need to have prepared your business plan. The business plan is like your skeleton of what is going to move your business forward, is how to grow your business from where you are right now to beyond what you are expecting. Because I am more or less like somebody that believes that when I'm writing my business plan, I'm looking at 5, 10 years from now. So I don't limit myself to 1 year or 2 years. So the goal of doing a pitch, an investor pitch, is for you to be able to secure these resources, to secure this funding to move forward. So ensure your business plan is airtight, and that will be able to win you a lot. Like as I said earlier on, for me, I actually have what you call believe me story pitch, because before you can be able to make a good pitch, you need to first believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, how on earth can you convince others to believe in you and to believe in your idea or your dream? So for me, pitching is more or less like constant. I'm always doing it when I meet people, when I'm with my co-workers, when I'm with my colleagues. Everybody, my life is a constant pitch. So because I have built myself into myself, knowing that yes, this is what I can do. I know myself, I know my limitations. So with that, I'm able to pitch constantly to everybody I meet. So for me, pitching, whether investment pitching or a sales pitch, I have to first of all believe in myself. So have that at the back of your mind. That's my advice. Believe in yourself first. Know your limitations, and with that, you'll be able to have a very, very good pitch. So really, pitching is more or less like a story, because it's not actually what you are selling, it's actually the story behind what you're selling. So ensure that in anything you do, be it a product or a service, there's a story behind it. Because if there's no story, how do you convince others to believe in that idea that you have? So always take that as the back of your mind. The believe in me story is important. Whether it's like for me, I also, like what doctor said, I also have a business that I'm running aside from my NGO, and it's all about organics. So I believe that organics is the way forward in terms of everything we eat, in terms of our lifestyle. Yeah. So in continuation of that, you should always understand that your investors will always have a perception of your story, because your brand story is more than, I see a lot of people believing that your brand is either your name or a logo or your timeline. For me, your brand is your story, because it's what people will say about you. You might have a fantastic logo, have a fantastic name, a fantastic tagline, but the people that you're serving, if they do not understand your story and do not believe in your story, your brand cannot go too far. It will just be more or less like a statement or a statistic or definitive statement, and that's it. Your brand is there. Oh, okay, this. But what do you stand for? That is your story. That is your brand story. What do you stand for? So always have that in the back of your mind. The believe in me story will always push your pitch forward. Yeah. Now, these are quotes from people that I also follow, that are more or less like my mentor. Scott Bedbury says that a great brand is a story that is never completely told. Your story is always continuous. Stories create emotional context that people need to locate themselves in a larger experience. What he means by this is that your story is continuous. It's always giving people the emotional effect, more or less like the aha effect of, oh, okay, this is what this brand is all about. Wow, give people that emotional feeling that, oh, they want to be associated with your brand. And so that's one of the things that has kept me going with what he has said, with the quote he said. He's also an author of the book, New Brand World, 8 Principles for Achieving Brand Leadership in the 21st Century. If you can get that book, it will help you. Another quote is from Barack Obama. He says, I had to know and understand my own story before I could listen and help other people with theirs. So this is what I am saying. You have to know your own story. What do you stand for? What makes you? What makes Samirah Faruk who she is? It's not just the name or the logo or the timeline, but what is the story behind that person? So think about what's the story behind you? What's your story? It doesn't have to be something fantastic. It could be something that is small. Because with that, if you understand yourself, you understand your own story, you'll be able to help others. Yeah? Now, pitching, like as I said earlier on, pitching has to do with relationship. So whatever kind of pitch you're doing, if it's an investment pitch or a sales pitch or even a personal pitch, you're pitching about yourself. That is who you are. You want people to become your friend, because after all, we make friends through pitching. In as much as we try to understand that no, it doesn't work like that. No, even trying to make friends, we're still pitching. We're pitching ourselves. Yeah. So pitching is all about relationship. Every story exists in relationship to everything else around it. For instance, you could, like for me now, my own story in terms of starting my NGO came about from my own father, my late father. And so it's a long story, it's a story for another day. So storytelling becomes an invitation to a relationship, because when you tell a story, you're inviting somebody into being in a relationship with you, so that the person now understands and knows you very well and knows that, okay, this is the person's story. I want to align with this story. Yeah. So pitching and relationship goes hand in hand. Yeah. Now, let's break it down into the two kinds of pitches with what is relation with us today as entrepreneurs. Now, you have the investment pitch. So when you're starting your pitch, or when you're pitching your, I call it a deal room, yeah? The deal room contains everything about your pitch, whereby you describe your business opportunity with the intention of securing funding, be it through the bank, if you're going to pitch in front of the bankers, or you have an investor that you want to pitch in for, or you are even in an elevator with Dangote or Otedola or something. So you always describe your business opportunity, and then take this advice from me. Start your pitch with a story, because with that you will now engage. You see, the human being is always attuned towards something that is a story. So don't just start your pitch and say, oh, I sell this. No, instead start your pitch with, I found out that a lot of people do not understand what it takes to eat healthy. And so because of that, I've found out the need that a lot of people, ailments, illnesses, people are more resistant to drugs that is being given, as the fact that they're not eating healthy. Start with a story. You could, if you don't have somebody that has been ill with, come down with ill from not eating healthy, you can now bring up a statistics, get your statistics, yeah? But always ensure that your pitch starts with a story, and then end it with a request for funding. For equity, you could give them a certain percentage for equity in your business, yeah? And then when you're doing your deal room, that's your pitch deck. Ensure that you have evidence of a large growing market. If you're selling Zobo, you understand that, okay, you have the large, you have a 20 or 50% market within your area, within a 2 kilometer mile radius. of your area. You have the evidence, facts and figures that yes, these are the total number of people that consume zobo, or these are the total number of people that consume egg or chicken or herbs, take tea, herbs and spices, since everybody's going healthy now. And then ensure, please, 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 ensure that there is a customer need. A lot of us fail in terms of entrepreneurship because we feel, oh, everybody's doing it. There must be something there. There must be money there. No, create a niche for yourself. Ensure that you have that customer needs. Ensure that, okay, the zobo you are selling, there's something different about your zobo. And, you know, after doing the test with your friends and family and your neighbors, you understand that, yes, people are beginning to like my product. They like the taste of my zobo. They like the way it is being packaged and all of that. So ensure you have a clear customer need, not because everybody is doing it to. So then the next one is clear benefit over competitors. What do you have that is up and above your zobo seller or your poultry? Everybody's selling poultry, everybody's selling chicken. What's the difference about your own chicken? So always have that clear advantage over your competitors. This is what you do. If it is home delivery, hit on that point when you're doing your pitching. It's home delivery you're doing. Or if you have select cuts, or if like for me now, organics, that is my advantage over my competitors, because there are not a lot of people that are doing organic poultry farming in Kano where I stay. So, and then finally have a sound commercial case. What this means here is that ensure that when you're selling your product is or service is something that is scalable, something that you know that can grow from here, from now till the next 5 years, 10 years, and all of that. So ensure that the product or service that you are going to offer is going to be around for the next 100 years, just like Coca-Cola. Yeah. Now let's continue. Like as I said, in your deal room, in your pitch deck, define who you are, what you're offering, why your products and services is what's backing. Because if the investor do not see why your product or service should be, why they should put their monies into your products and services, you will not get far. So ensure that, yes, you have a cogent reason for why that investor should back your product or service, because you have already started something. You already have a history of what you have done. So emphasize on that, yeah? And then what you want from your audience. What the audience means here is your investor. What do you want from them? Do you want a loan? Do you want grants? Be clear from the onset what you want from them. Is it equity share? Are you willing to sell some of the shares of your company or your organization to them? So you have to understand before you do your investment pitch. What is the need for your audience? You see, there are different kinds of investors. For some investors, you might appeal to their sense of consciousness. So some investors, you can appeal to making money. So you need to understand your investors. First of all, you need to understand the kind of people that they are. Are you appealing to their consciousness? In terms of me, for instance, if I'm looking for an investor, my first how would I put it? My first research would be on investors that are health conscious. That way I'm appealing to them because I am selling pure organic products. And so it is important that they invest in me so that they will increase on their own ideas of making sure everybody eats healthy. So understand what it is in for your investors, okay? Now, developing your investment pitch. People make a whole lot of mistake by thinking that you keep on talking on and on and on and on and on. My pitches, I limit it to at maximum three minutes if it's too much. But before you get that 3 minutes or 2 minutes, take 30 minutes to develop this pitch. So that what you're now pitching is going to be points and facts, so that people don't get bored easily. Because I've seen pitches whereby when they start pitching, although it was 3 minutes, but it was not captivating enough for the investors. So ensure you develop your pitch, your 2 or 3 minutes pitch within 30 minutes. Ensure that all the facts and figures are in that 2 or 3 minutes. And before you start, practice, practice, practice. Pitch in front of your neighbor, your colleagues, your friend, so that by the time you're pitching in front of your investor, you don't have stage fright. Because I've seen a lot of, I would advise that you even watch Dragon's Den. That would help you as well, because those guys are actually mean, but at least they're doing a good job. So learn how to be confident, how to be able to answer questions, and for some things, leave some parts of your pitch, leave some things that questions could be answered. Okay. Next is your sales. Talked about investment. Now is
Hello, Samirah, are you still with us? Okay, it's like we're having some bits of technical issues there, and we'll just wait for Samirah to get back on. We'll give her a minute to get back on. And while we wait for Samirah to get back on, please once again put your questions in the chat box if you have questions for Samirah, and once she gets back on, she will address those questions. And while we wait for Samirah, I would like to introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker today, Mr. Ugwumsinachi Okorie. Let me just stop the slides for now. And I'll just run through his profile briefly. So Ugwumsinachi, he's the managing partner and executive director at AM House Group. He's also the executive director at Innovation for Development Center. And some of the works that he's been involved in includes rethinking finance through technology to democratize access for funding innovation through non-traditional investing. He was a 2018 University of Lagos NELA Business Leader Fellow, and he's currently at UCL, University of London, as an MBA candidate. And Ugwumsinachi brings 13 years of experience for market innovation, enterprise development, and support. He's very passionate about Africa and using market models to drive sustainability. So you are very welcome once again, and we look forward to your session. Hello, Ugwumsinachi. I think you need to unmute your mic. Hello.
I could hear you, but then the network was breaking. Thank you for the introduction. So I don't know, am I supposed to take off from here?
Yes, while we wait for Samirah to get back on.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just as introduced, my name is Ugwumsinachi Okorie. Very commonly, you also see Joshua as part of my name. That's because sometimes I go to places and they struggle to call my name. So that happens. Of course, if you've listened to Samirah, you would have heard a whole lot about pitching. So I'm not going to go back to most of the things you have said. What I would do is that, please, Dr. Itoro, I'm having problem navigating my slide. Okay. All right. Yeah, so as I was saying, I'm not going to go back to most of the things you've said. I will just look at how I'm going to complement most of those things you've heard. And she have told you about you as a person being ready and trying to understand your story. Now, but coming from the investor's perspective, I'm going to talk to you about stewardship and about empathy, right? because I'm going to base my talk mostly on pitching for investors. So we're going to be looking at it from that perspective. And most times, one of the things we've seen very commonly in the industry is that it's related to a romantic relationship or marriage. So, and one of the things I've seen among people who done successful pitching and have good investment relationship is that they have always approached it from the perspective of their counterparts. Like if you're an investor, if you want to do well with your entrepreneur, you need to have the feel. How do my entrepreneurs feel? Now, and I'll tell you some stories. I work with investor. The investor is actually looking for you, and he is or she is as well looking for how to invest, actually, because that's the investor's business. The investor is in business to invest. But then there is one more point, and that point is very simple. Most of the investors are built in a very unlikely business model, because investors are built on a business model that you are likely going to fail. So you would understand how they see you and how they approach how they approach you as an investment, right? So number one is in the investor's business model. He will assume that most of the investments he's going to make would fail. So, and usually he would do 10 investments and then maybe one would succeed. So if he misses one, that one that would succeed, he automatically becomes a failure. And that's the reason why he's just trying to see how all of the investments he's doing would definitely succeed. So God willing, one clicks and he's fine. So that's his model. Actually, he's going out, he's looking to invest. So if you understand it from that perspective, and he wants you to do well. If you have a very high valuation, he wants it to be that way. But he also wants a situation whereby you are realistic and what you're saying is the truth, right? So if you flip the table around and then you're able to understand this is the investor I'm pitching to, that will make more sense, and it will help you have a very seamless pitching when you want to pitch, when you're either pitching or talking to an investor. Of course, this is the outline for today's class, and you've seen what pitches are. And Samirah have told us that it is your business plan, and oftentimes you have to present it verbally, but sometimes you have to send it as either mail or it could be elevator speech and stuffs like that. So in whatever case, now the point I have you to understand is that Peter Drucker thinks about communication, because that's what you are doing in pitching. That communication is what the listener does. So if you are telling a story to me and I'm unable to understand that your story, you might have told a very beautiful story. Then, but if I'm unable to understand it, then you've not done a very good story. That's it. So if you want to pitch to someone, first of all, you need to make sure you understand as much as possible the person you are talking to. That's it. Now, if you also have listened to Samirah, you would have noticed some of the things she have told you that would be part of your pitch. Now, I'm not sure what you need to include in your pitch, because I'm not sure there's a formula. This is an art. And most time when you look at art, it depends on the artist's discretion. That's one of the most important story. But it could go along to include things like tagline, which is the story that Samirah was talking about. Then you would also, at the end of the pitch, most likely have told a story about the problem you are trying to solve, how big the problem is, why it's important, your solution, and the unique value proposition or the unique selling point that you are providing. Now, because you are looking for money, your investor wants to know where you are, which is your traction and the team, and your call to action and the wrap up, which usually would be you coming back to tell us, to tell the person you are talking to, back to how your ending and the tagline ends, and then you have to thank whoever you are talking to, basically. There are key elements. Just as I said, I'm not too sure what should be in your pitch, but I've given you examples of what I feel should be in the pitch and what most likely an average person who, say for example, an investor will be looking out for in your pitch, which are some of these things I have highlighted here. Now, but there are some basic things, which is the key elements of your pitch. And that is, there are things you need to understand. You may not be able to, in a 60-minute pitch, explain all of these elements in full details. So I would expect you that sometimes you might be doing a business that have maybe many product lines, many revenue streams, many stories around it. So, but the best you can do is to look for your Amazon book. By Amazon book, what we mean by that is that when Amazon started, it started with selling books. So what is the key product you are selling? Focus on that key product, right? Then you could now come back and begin to look at how it matches with all of these elements. And that could be simplicity, that could be clarity, that could be focus. You have to join those three together. You have to pick your Amazon book, and think about, how am I going to keep this thing I want to say now to be very simple? And most times you have to also find a way to embed, right? So embed all of this in your, I think I should take some time to do some examples, of course. Then you could as well look for clarity. How do you achieve clarity? So that at the end of the day, it's more like you are building a house. You don't confuse the person you are talking to, so that you don't know when is it that you are talking about the roof, and when you are talking about the mezzanine, and when you are talking about maybe the floor. They need to understand what will be the difference between the roof and the floors, right? Then, and as you are moving along, you also need to have that clarity and focus. The point about it is just that it's not about what you can. It's all about what you can remove from all of this that I've listed here. What is it that, for instance, you could basically remove? Oftentimes you could embed it. Say, for example, if you have a tagline, if you have a story, right? Then number two, usually is not is what exactly is it that you can remove. It's usually not how to include everything in a pitch. In fact, a pitch is meant to get you to the next meeting. That's exactly what a pitch should do. And when you are beginning your pitch, do remember that you need to start your pitch in such a way you capture the attention of who you are talking to. Number one is that if you listen to Samirah, she told you about storytelling, like how you could possibly use story. And that is what I mean by tagline, for instance. And one of the things you could do, just imagine, for example, most of the people you would talk to, and you told the person that I want to send Google packing, right? Or for example, you are in you are arriving in a meeting venue, and you are with Dangote, and Dangote seems to be coming late to that meeting, and you said, Mr. Dangote, how about if I could have if you have the opportunity to move from the airport to this meeting venue just in 2 minutes? Of course, he have that facility because he would have booked a flight from wherever he an Uber a flight. But let's say, for example, he came by land and he didn't know he could do that. Right, and that's how maybe you are pitching, for example, startup like Vertifly, for instance. And most often, what you always need to do is that you need to find a very catchy way. You would begin to, like, a hair-splitting comment, which you could validate, which you could use to start up the pitching process, because the first 5 seconds tells the person whether he's interested or he's not. Right, so those are very, very critical, how you begin your pitch. And I would tell you, for instance, if I come on board and I begin to tell you that I'm going to make so and so amount of revenue, of course it makes a whole lot of sense. Or I started by telling you some stories that doesn't follow, that may make a whole lot of sense. That's if we are actually sitting down and you already know what I'm trying to talk about. But this is in a scenario whereby you've not met me before, I've not met you before, or we've not had that discussion before, and you need me to buy into that product in 5 seconds. So that's where taglines and the story comes in. Don't tell very long stories. If you listen to Flying Doctors, Dr. Brown will always tell you about the story of how his friend or a close person died and what she believed would have been the solution. And if you look at that story, you would have seen that in her tagline or in her story that she already painted this problem. She could maybe move ahead by now giving you the statistics of the people that die every day, right, on because of the problem she's trying to solve. And then she could now tell you about her air services and how you could book an air ambulance in a click of a button, and it's there in record time. Now, these are key points I wanted to make. That's, you need to keep it very simple. You need to make sure that the person you are talking to understand clearly what you are talking about and focus. That's your Amazon book. You have to focus in a part of your story. Don't tell all of the story at a time. You most likely won't get it right. I've just tried to stress that it's about what you remove of all of your story, right? What is it that you can remove? It's not about what you can include in your story, right? So you have a whole lot of story to tell, like 50-page business plan. So you don't want to tell all of that. It's about what is it that you want to remove. Most time you see people start their pitches with we are multiple award winning, and that might be effective depending on how you say that. But I would argue that with the time you are starting that's not a very important way, a very effective way to do that, right? Because that's more the thing you are supposed to be telling us at that point is the most important. So if being multiple award winning is the most important, that would make sense at that stage. Of course, how do you pitch? I'm not sure about the science of pitching, and I've told you, if this is an art, it depends on the discretion of the artists. But one of the things about it is that a pitch is a summary, anyhow you want to look at it. Now, the place you have to start from is that you need to start from a business plan. There is no two ways about it, because most times it's more like people want to pitch and they want to pitch from the air. The truth is this: you cannot tell a good story if you don't have a story. That is it. You cannot tell a good story if you don't have a story. You need to, first of all, develop your story. And the first way to do that is that you have to tell a whole lot of your story in business plan. You need to look at how is this thing going to work, right? And at the end of the day, you'll be able to summarize it into your executive summary, and then you come down to your pitch, elevator speech, which is more like, I mean by that, like a paragraph of maybe a 100-page business plan. Then usually you will come up with a buzzword, and that means something that, for instance, because most times you just meet someone in an instant and you don't know how to start, and you listen to Paystack, they will tell you about Strive for Africa. From the one when they started, they kept saying it, that they are this, if what the story they told us is correct, that they've always said from that they are Strive for Africa. So if you understand Strive for Africa, then you understand what Paystack. Then if I tell you about Uber for helicopter, then you understand Vertify. Then if I tell you about, say for example, hospital in the air, then maybe you could understand Flying Doctors, right? And even from most times, even from the names, most times, if you've done what you are supposed to do, you would have even noticed that sometimes, for example, you see innovations like magic water. Right? So if I have that buzzword, I could not tell you, what about if you are thirsty? Have you imagined if you are thirsty that you could make water by clicking your phone, then water will come and you will drink it. Somehow someone will be interested to know what type of magic is this young man talking about, right? And that's how you begin with your pitch, with some of these processes. So don't skip anyone. Of course, like we've seen entrepreneurs come up with saying, okay, I want to do link canvas, and with my link canvas, I'm going to do this. But the best thing to do, if you don't want to be carried off the balance, is to have a business plan. Understand that your business plan very well. I would suggest, if you can, we have in the ILO the SIYB manual. It does a whole lot where you split down both your markets, your business, your numbers. You understand them. Most times, for instance, Samirah talked about Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. For instance, when you go to some of those places, you notice that why most good pitches don't make it is the numbers. So, but if you've sat down for days and you do the numbers, to tell someone the summary of what you've sat down for those long days to do will not be a major challenge, right? So the next is some of the pitfalls we've seen. Most times when we see people pitch, what are the pitfalls that are very common? I first of all mentioned technology, not because it should be technology, but I'm using that to point to something. Usually, irrespective of what you have done at the background, let's say, for example, someone that have done Magic Quarter might have spent a whole lot of time doing lab work, inventing a whole lot of things. Don't come and begin to tell us about your inventions. Tell us about what you do, right? There are some inventions that are very simpler than the other. So most times you see those ones that have spent a whole lot of time, so especially scientists, because I also work within this field of research commercialization. They have difficulty trying to explain to us in a way we can understand, because they begin to look at the how they played ball in Aba, and then they landed in New York, and from New Jersey they were there in some minutes, and how Supre happened, and about Einstein discovered MSCQ and all those things. Leave those long terminologies out of it. Tell us that story as though you want to tell your grandmother that is in the village that doesn't understand English, right? If your grandmother went to school, check till you get somewhere in your generation where someone didn't go to school and you want to explain to that person. Then number two is that leave emotions out of things, right? And most times you would notice that, especially most of you are female entrepreneurs, don't go to pitch and then you want to play that emotion games. Most investors are trained in such a way that they don't all this, whether you are feminist or you are mother of two or you are widow. Let's know that story maybe in a later stage, not at, so we could say, maybe this person, let it be a plus, not the main thing. That's the point, right? So leave emotions out of it. And most times there are some other stories you see behind those bigger stories. For instance, I've been seeing around very recently that $1 billion was what went to Africa, black founders. And then in the US, out of 150 billion. And then you go back and you want to know what is the proportion of the female founders. And you notice that they have less than the 0.5%, and they got 6.7%. And most of the investors are very aware of those numbers, right? So, and Samirah did mention about practice. You can never get your pitch right except with continuous practice. Even the best of the pitch persons used to lose their anointing on the stage. So the best you can do is to do the practice and make sure you are fine. You are very, very well. Now, I've told you about empathy. You trying to understand who you are talking to. If you want to talk to me, for example, and you don't understand me, you don't know what I've done, you don't know what my projects are, you don't know what I'm interested in, you may not be able to have that empathy because you don't understand me. So most time it's best to do your due diligence, right? So understand who is it you're talking to. Understand if there are possible conflicts of interest, you need to have known before talking to me, right? Then the other thing about pitching that you need to avoid is stereotype. We've come here, we talk to you about taglines, we talk to you, sorry, about what should be on your pitch. This is an art. And in art, there might be principles as we have tried to list it. But the main thing you should focus on is the person you are talking to. Now, you've tried telling a story, the story doesn't work, remove the story, try something else until you get it right. So don't be so stereotyped, or for example, you want to add all the elements we are talking about here, depending on how you are telling your story. you could, for example, find a new way whereby before you have told maybe a one sentence story, you've talked about problem, you've talked, for instance, if I tell you Uber for helicopter, you already know that Uber for helicopter should be for rich people. So if I'm asking about the market, it simply means I want to know the number of big men that is in the place you operate, right? I also already know that Uber for helicopter would have been people that use smartphones. So you don't need to try to include everything, right? So having mentioned that, these are some of the tools, and because I'm running out of time, you need one. Some of these things are your product demo. If you already have one, it could be in form of video, it could be in form of the physical product, it could be in form of whatever that you could use to demonstrate your product. Then it could be video pitch, just like you could do a generic video pitch, trying to explain your trying to do the same thing that you would have done in the physical, but this one you assume an audience and you are not talking to that audience. Then you have pitch deck, you have investor teasers. I think everybody knows what pitch deck is. I won't have time to talk so much about pitch deck, but investor teaser is most likely, there are sometimes when you want to send to an investor, the thing you send to an investor usually should be your investor teaser, not like if we are prospecting in the investor community, you use investor teaser. It oftentimes look like executive summary, which is, but most time you want to tell them about what their return should be, when should they expect their return, what type of investment are you looking for, and stuff like that, your product, and a whole lot of things you think an investor should know in a page, or maximum in a page usually. Because most times it could be even infographics you are using to do that. Then you have executive summary, and which is the summary of your business plan. So you need to have all of this handy. Most times you don't need to use it, but usually if you are raising funds, for example, you need to have all of this. And very importantly, which is one of the asking you your number and you don't know that number, is still explained it. You would have noticed that investors are looking for, what are you going to use my money for? So when you want to pitch to me and I'm looking at you from, okay, now and what next? After all of these things you are saying, very impressive pitch, what are you going to use? I want to see your traction Samirah was talking about. And you also, if you have testimonials, you need to include them. You see, that's in second part, because you may not always need that. And link canvas, you could Google this. What link canvas is very popular. People are using it to replace business plan, but I strictly suggest you go for business plan first. Of course, your business plan would have been obsolete after some months, but the way you see the dynamics as it changes is very important, right? Then I think you need another financial plan, which your projections and a whole lot of other things would be there. Most times, for example, in AMCs, as well as developing projects, we do scoping activities, market research, you will always have that handy, and whatever thing you also think will be very important to you. Of course, less than 2% of entrepreneurs get the money, and I can assure you, sometimes female entrepreneurs have some challenges to get that. So you need to be as prepared as possible, right? And most times, what we look for when looking for investors, for investee, is the value, not necessarily whether you are a woman or you are a man, right? For instance, most times you don't understand it. For example, if I make an investment call for you and you happen to be a bad investment, it affects my next investment, right? So how I'm able to mobilize the next fund. So if I have the money, it will be a little bit different. And most of the people you'll be interfacing with will not have that. I will not have time to talk about it, but usually when you are raising money, for example, you have to go through a pre-seed. The pre-seed you usually should have been like your owner's equity normally, or the money that your family and friends are giving to you, the money you basically use for bootstrap before you, like, for example, you want to check out, research your ideas before you start building your product. That's your pre-seed. And by the time, most times, depending at who you are, pre-seed could be raised from institutional investor or whoever investor it is, and it could be from an angel. But angels, most often in Nigeria, you see them around seed, right? Then after that seed, you would have, after you've used the money to do what you said you want to use it for, then you could possibly go into the next round. right? That would be Series A. You could have a down round, and that's, for instance, you raised 1 million at first, and then you are now trying to raise 500,000. That's a down round, which means even you are already having problem with the initial investors, but you are simply looking for how to keep the business alive. Now, one point about your pre-seed and seed, whatever you are doing at that stage, please be careful. Most times it's best to keep the equity you want to give out at less than 10%. The reason is because you keep getting diluted as you move along, right? You keep getting diluted. If you're not very careful, by the time you get to maybe Series B, you're already a minority. That is all of you, if you're a team, put together. So you want to minimize the amount of equity you want to give out at that stage, right? So but one more thing about it is that execution is always the solution to most of these things. If you do your job very well, you would have noticed that most times you may not need to, the amount of money you are going to raise in your Series A would have moved very high because your valuation would have been higher. And these are the type of monies you would look for, right? And that could be grant. But the problem with the thing about grant is that if you get a grant, you are not returning it back, and you are getting that money, and it's free, so it's equity free as well. So you have full control. But the size of grant, oftentimes you could get 1 billion grant. Of course, it's possible. Most grants are usually small, and the ease of getting those grants are usually through competition. And for example, if you hear that 1,000 people applied and they're taking one person, it means you have 0.01% chance, right? Then investment. The problem with investment is that if you play your game well, you would still have control, but most times you could lose control. And one more point, as a Nigerian, there are some clauses in the Nigerian law whereby you are unable to have non-voting equity shares, right? In the Nigerian law, most time when you give out equity, you have to when you give out shares, of course, you give out shares, it dilutes your equity. When you give out shares, those shares have to vote, right? Unlike, for example, in Facebook, I'm not sure, Mark Zuckerberg, all shares in Facebook is able to vote, and that's why Mark Zuckerberg still have control, right? Then, but the size of investment is always ideal for what you want to use it for, right? Then the ease of getting it, if you are doing your job very well, is much easier to get, right? Then you see debts and loan, the control, you have the full control. The size will depend on your past performances, right? So it may not be the best depending on what you want to do. And you have in Nigeria, the ease of getting debts and loans are very, very low. Then bootstrapping is when you find a way to make things happen. You could use market partnerships, you could use paid services, you could use prepaid services, sorry. You could use whatever means or your money to bootstrap, right? That's the best if you can do that. It goes with the size as your performance, and you have control over it. And the ease is but the point is that you could lose market by the time, because you have to grow organically, and that's not always the best thing to do. Just if Lyft didn't get money from SoftBank and almost trying to overtake Uber now, you would have looked at that would have been very bad. So there are other ones like convertibles and Mexins. Convertible is when someone is giving you loan and the investor is also thinking to convert to equity, and Mexin is a little bit convertible, but Mexin is a situation whereby if there is a default, that's not the original plan, right? So having said that, on valuation, because that's one of the things we see, some people see in Oluwa raising $170 million, and then you ask them, what is the online food platform you want to do, how much is it? They would say, okay, I'm looking at, if you can give me $20,000 and I will give you 0.005, maybe into 1 million places, 0.5% equity. And then I want to look at what is the rationale behind it, and they're giving me instances of these guys in the market. Anyways, you do your evaluation based on the stage of your company, right? If you're raising Series C or Series D, is different. And if you are doing IPO is when you are now leaving equity investors and you're going public, right? You have to be listed in a stock exchange to do that. Then you have founders experience. If think about it, if you tells you want to do a startup, the investment you would expect will be more, because the resources, the inherent value he's bringing is much more, right? Then competition for the investment. Actually, this is a right time to look for investment in Africa, because there are a whole lot of investment. I can tell you, those of us who does origination knows that it could take you 6 months before you could find one good investment. There are a whole lot of, everybody is looking for, they know that it is the time for Africa, and they are looking for how can they be part of it. So what they are simply looking for, so that is, this one is in your favor. Competition for investment. There are a whole lot of investments looking out for you. Then market size. For example, if you are selling clothes, you can't begin to use the market. Tell me that there are 100 and maybe about 200, like 50% of Nigerians are women. So 100 million women will be wearing clothes, because you didn't invent the clothes. So you should be looking at the size that is yours, right? The number of people. Take for example, we can now begin to look at from market size, from your performance. Then economic performance. So if you have, from the first year, you have done $10 million, then and you're projecting $10 million the next year. So if you're looking for $200 million, then I could be sure that in the next 5 years, maybe you would have that money, at least to begin with. That is very separate from someone who is just selling for maybe 1,200, now asking for of course, you can ask for any amount of money you want if you can justify it. But the only thing is that it affects the valuation, and if it affects the valuation, you might be the minority, right? That's the simple point. So
I think we would have to cut this a bit short, because I think we're gradually running out of time, and maybe we take 1 or 2 questions on this. And please, the slides will be made available, and also know that Ugwumsinachi will be available if you would like to book sessions with him. And I just want, just before we go, just so that you could respond to some of the questions that our participants have. One of the questions, and across both presentations, they've talked about the importance of telling a story and what to include in a story. But how do you know how short your pitch would be, depending on who you're speaking to? How can you determine how short or how long your pitch should be?
I don't know if Samirah is here, and maybe I should just take that. I think just look at it from the perspective that you are an artist. So if you are in an elevator speech, and the purpose of your pitch, in a pitch, you are simply trying to get the next appointment. You are not there to tell the whole story. So if I'm in an elevator, then, for example, let's say I'm going to spend 10 minutes. Let's say there are in-betweens. And most times you don't even know where the next person wants to drop. And I think I pitched to someone, and the person was going to maybe 7th floor, and he followed me to 12th floor where I was going to, and later he said, okay, I'm going down now. So I didn't know. Personally, because I wanted to tell him all of my story, I followed up. I said, okay, let's keep going down. So I stopped at the 9th floor. He was still going down to 7, right? So not every time you have all of that time. That's number one. So you want to say, for example, if I have 10 minutes with this person, how do I what am I going to remove, and what am I going to say? Now, for example, there are some type of innovation you want to tell the story about, and your story could be a story about how you have spent like 12 years or 20 years or 30 years in developing this, and why. Maybe at the end of the day, maybe what you have done and why, right? All of those 30 years, and the person is now looking at, okay, if this person has spent 40 years in this, it means he's the only person in the whole world that can do this, depending on what you want to do. It simply depends on your story. You could be telling the story, and sometimes, but don't invent an evil story against yourself. But if you are doing health, for example, you could be telling story of, just for example, I use the instance of Dr. Brown, always telling the story of how his friend died or a close person died, and what she believed would be the solution to that problem. So, but it's not a must. I also repeat that it's not a must that you must tell a story. It depends on who you are. I remembered what's his name, a microtraction general partner, coming to tell us in a room in 2017 of someone who just came to a pitch and say, I'm from Africa. Last year we did $5 million US. Well, the first investment we had was $20,000. Last year we did $5 million US. We're doing $8.5 million US, and we're looking for 100,000 now to do so. And so I'm not sure about how much they were asking for, but any reasonable investor who is any investor anyways would want to know what is it they are doing, right? And because that makes sense, because that aligns with what most of the people in that room wants to achieve, because they want to take in the next 5 to 7 years, which is the fund life, they want to see the money they collected at least multiplied by times 10. So if someone have given you 20,000 and you change it to $5 million US, then people are looking for you. That's it.
Okay.
And that's what happens mostly here in Nigeria. Most times, the way you see Mono now, a lot of investors are not doing the job. They are lining up to know when Mono wants to raise the next money, because they believe Mono is well structured, and that's some of the things we need to differentiate ourselves.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Ugwumsinachi. I think there has been some technical issues. We've not been able to get Samirah back on. So just one more question before we leave. I know we've run 4 minutes over time. We have some of our entrepreneurs asking that would you be available would it be okay if they send or book appointment with you and send their pitches to you for you to assess or give them some feedback on it? Would that be okay?
Okay, maybe limited to 2 persons actually, because definitely the time is not there to. But one of the things we can do is that if you have a venture, a scalable, if you have a business that have venture scale and scalable advantage, if you can work that out with if Dr. Itoro will accept, you can do some pitches with her, and if she accepts it, and maybe we might be able to, through some of our partners, give you 120,000 in PECs, equity free, in courtesy of IBM, who is one of our partners. We can do that. Number 2 is but I'm not able to, we can also do investment call, capital call for some of the participants for the program, but the maximum I can do is after Easter, maximum of two entrepreneurs.
Okay, that's fine. So what would happen if you have pitches that you like to get reviewed? You could submit them, and then we'll look into that and see if we have some of our other mentors that will look into it, and then we'll take up the suggestion that Ugwumsinachi has suggested. And I know while we've exceeded the time exceedingly, the slides will be made available to everyone. We have some of our participants that are hoping that you finish explaining your slides. So please feel free if you need to drop off and join some other sessions. And Ugwumsinachi, if you have a few more minutes, if you could just quickly run through your slides, just so that our entrepreneurs can benefit from it, because it's loaded with a lot of information that I know that people are very interested in and learning from.
Okay, I would just within the small time I have left, how you approach investors, which is where we are now. Most investors, it's more like if you want to do a proposal, irrespective of whatever proposal you want to do, and irrespective of who you are and who you want to talk to, most investors would invest in a line, not in a dot. So let's say, for instance, you've seen an investor, you could simply send and say, for example, a lending request to that investor. Now, the next is that if you're able to start conversation with that person, you could explain yourself, just normal pitch to the person and explain. Most times they will ask you, what is it you need? And sometimes they will be following you up and you don't know. So most times you could get back to them after 3 months and tell them, oh, maybe at first you were starting, right? So you could tell them this is where we are, and then you now have some other traction. You could report back to them and say, not necessarily, this is where we are now. You are checking up on them, just stuffs like that. because most of the time, some of these people you see that raised 170 million, what they have done very well is that over time people could see their traction, so it's easy to relate to them. So if you are just starting, look at it from the point of, oh, I've met this investor, he's in my network. So somehow you are either on your LinkedIn, some people are still most startup, not everyone. And most times, most of all those people that are monitoring spirits on social media, they know everything that is happening. Most of the people that are on my social media, on my LinkedIn, I follow them. And sometimes someone have asked for some money, maybe say last 6 months, and then I want to check back after 6 months to know what happened. And sometimes it's just for research. So follow up. Like, you don't just, maybe when you want money, you now move and check with the person. No. So tell these people and begin to build your traction gradually and report back somehow. Then number 2 is that try to build up some traction, because most time pitching is about credibility. How believable is your story? If, for example, that the first time we met, you were just having that idea, and now, for example, we're talking about heavy-duty drone, and you now have 2 heavy-duty drones in the air, and then you have some licenses, that is a very powerful traction. The evaluation, when you were just telling me, as with just a vague story from your mind, no matter how clear it was, would be very small compared to the evaluation, even though you are not making money, but you have something that is a prototype that is flying in the air, right? So the little money you have, use it to see how much traction you could make. Because of time, I was thinking I've spent some time here. One of the things you could do is that don't just, when investor is trying to do due diligence on you, also do due diligence on that investor. Investors are banking on the fact that you would fail. They know most of their investment will fail. So they are polygamously married. So you are you cannot even raise the next money sometimes without, of course, sometimes they want liquidation event, which is maybe going through the next round to happen, or maybe income happening. So, but you want to be more careful about who you want to raise money from. Sometimes raising money from big investors are not the best. If you raise money from people like us that are still upcoming artists, it's always better, because we're trying to show that you can do this thing. Are you getting the point? So sometimes, like the first 3 people we did businesses we did capital calls for, all of them are doing very well, and one of them raised their first fund 125,000, and within a record time compared to. So it's more like, for example, an average entrepreneur investor calls you maybe once. The ones that write checks and give to you calls you once in a quarter, right? So, but one more thing you can do is that you can anticipate, right, what the problems would be and begin to prepare, so that you prepare for it and you don't just react. Give them jobs to do. Like, if you are doing very well, you are asking them to prospect the next investor to help you get the next big client, and that's most times if you are doing very well. So you look for the investors that will do what you want them to do. Not just, don't look for money alone here in Nigeria. It's very difficult to do business in Nigeria, I can assure you, right? So look for people that have the experience and that have the capacity to help you, and try to balance between what is it you are looking for, right? Between the exposure, between the coaching, between the mentorship and everything you are looking for. Try to balance it up, right? And see how the type of people you are looking for. But if you, for the mistakes you are going to do, of course, there are ethical hacks you can do, but don't tell lies. Be very truthful, right? Because during the due diligence, if you tell me you don't have a customer, then if I'm coming in, I'm looking for how we're going to test your idea and what you are going to do. It makes more sense for you. And the best thing you can do in any business is, in any innovation, is get it done, right? And move to the next one. It makes more sense for you. Don't try to, those are some of the big mistakes to see here. Don't try to hang on this one. You're not executing it and we're not seeing anything done. Get it done and move to the next one, please. So with the following points of mine, ladies and gentlemen, I am sure that I've been able to convince you that you are ready for Africa, and not to confuse you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ugwumsinachi. That was very, very insightful, and I'm sure that there are many bits that our entrepreneurs are learning from, Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Apologies once again for exceeding the time limit. And then the slides will be made available, and the recording of this session will also be available on YouTube, on our channels on YouTube, and this will be sent to you via email and will also be made available on the Google Classroom platform. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Samirah, for your talk, and we hope that we'll be able to engage with you much later. And then if you'd like to book sessions with them, please go on Peak Time and book sessions with them. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dr. Itoro.
Thank you.
Yeah.